Airtel Africa is a company which offers mobile phone services, mobile money services in multiple African countries. However, it is listed in the UK and the stock price has recently fallen by around 30%. I own the stock, I bought more today. I think it's a very attractive growth company, and let's dive into the numbers today. This is all in US dollars, by the way. From 118 million customers to now 140 customers in just 3 years, and especially their mobile money transaction value has increased by a lot. Mobile money might sound a bit weird for you because you're probably either from the US or Europe, and here when it comes to payments we use credit cards, debit cards, maybe Apple Pay, maybe Google Pay, but that is already very rare. Well, in Africa they usually send money via their phone. They skip the whole credit card, this is where they send money. So Airtel Africa is a big player here. They're not only in like phone plans, etc., which we would have here, for example, with AT&T. No, they also offer this. Revenue has also exploded from 3.8 to 5.2 billion. However, here comes the reason why the stock has gone down recently. We can see revenue has fallen year over year. Well, this is where the risk with this company comes in. It operates in Africa, in many different countries, and a lot of its revenue came from Nigeria. And we can see year over year, revenue has declined by 35%. Well, that is because of a currency decrease. We can see the Naira has devalued against the dollar by a lot. And this of course hit Airtel Africa. If the Naira wouldn't have devalued, they would have grown by 25%. Now it's minus 34% year over year. They were hit very hard because Nigeria was such a big market for them. It was their biggest, but now it is not. Now East Africa is making up way more. And yes, they also had some currency devaluation, but it was not as hard hit as Nigeria. And Francophone Africa was doing even better. They basically had no currency devaluation. They grew by 13%. So this is where the risk with this company comes in. They have the country risk. Countries in Africa usually way less stable when it comes to currency and their political system. If you remember, multiple months ago there were some coups in Africa, also in 2 of the countries that Airtel Africa operates in. It has not really impacted the business there. But you gotta think, if a currency falls in these countries, that also impacts Airtel Africa. The risk has now been reduced, because the Naira has been so devaluated, Nigeria doesn't make up so much of Airtel Africa's revenue anymore. Now their EBITDA only makes 200 million per quarter, East Africa now makes 300 million basically, and Francophone Africa 150 million. So even if the Naira, for example, falls a lot more, it is not going to be the end of a company. They still have a lot of revenue coming in, they still have a lot of net income, and we can see their net debt is also not very high. In fact, over the last few quarters, they have greatly reduced it down to 3.2 billion. Now, their operating free cash flow shouldn't be taken as normal free cash flow when we look at their income. If we want to look at the true free cash flow, we should look at net cash generated from operating activities. That is 1.7 billion, minus capital expenditures. That is around 500 million. Let's call it 1.2 million in the last 9 months. That is 400 million in free cash flow per quarter, so around $1.6 billion on the year. That means their debt is well covered at least. But that also means something else. The company is probably extremely cheap. We didn't run the numbers yet, but if we already know, $1.6 billion in free cash flow, even if it hasn't grown year over year because of a currency devaluation, they still make $1.6 billion in free cash flow. Their market cap is only 3.5 billion pounds. That is around $4.5 billion. So that is a very, very low multiple, even for a stock that is fairly risky in African countries. If it would be in one country, for example, if a company would only operate out of Nigeria, I would also say, okay, that is too risky for me. But it is spread out over all of Africa. We can see they operate in many different parts of Africa. And even if some of these countries perform poorly at the moment, for example, Nigeria, at least its currency is doing worse. Overall, the total market of Africa in the long term is gonna develop positively. And when it comes to telecommunication, not a lot of foreign companies are willing to invest in Africa. So Airtel Africa has a position here where they're the biggest player in the market. They're building up the network towers right here. They're getting the network in. Other companies, if they want to compete, they will have to invest billions and billions of dollars now. And the company is growing without taking on more debt. Their debt has basically not moved and even decreased, while paying out a nice dividend as well. The dividend yield is currently nearly 5%. Of course, Verizon and AT&T currently offer a higher yield, but they're also not growing. You can get the 6.5% from AT&T. Verizon has a slightly higher dividend yield, but here you have companies which are not growing, have a bunch of debt, and they basically only exist to now pay off the dividends. Or you can get Airtel Africa in a market that is growing fast, has positioned itself well in the mobile money segment, here it has especially high growth, and in the normal data segment. Yes, they had this one down year, where the currency devalued so much in their core market, but now their core market is not as important anymore when it comes to the financials, and the company is still fantastically run. In fact, the management is handling the company so well, the return on capital employed is at 23.3%. Latest quarter, it's gone to 24%. For a telecommunications company, this is extremely well, and that just gives you an idea of the margins this company currently has. Plus, they're starting to buy back shares. A $100 million buyback program has been introduced, and that is on a yearly basis, and I expect them to continue that. That would be over 2% of the shares that are being bought back. You have a company which is fast growing, buys back shares, pays out a nice dividend, and has low debt. This is how multi-baggers are born. Now, let's run the numbers, let's see at what price we should buy it. Now per share, the company currently makes around 32 cents in free cash flow, but let's be conservative, let's put this as 30. Historically, they have grown free cash flow at a much higher rate than 6%. But let's be conservative. Let's say the environment is terrible in Africa for the next few years. It's only gonna grow at 6% and then 5%. Despite the share buybacks, they're currently buying back around 2% of the shares, and they're probably gonna increase that buyback program as it goes on. So this is truly very low revenue growth rates, which I don't think are gonna happen, but let's be conservative. 10% discount ratio, 12 multiple. Now, that sounds very low, but it is still a fairly risky company. It's obviously gonna get a lower rating. It's an Africa stock. Maybe in 10 years, the African continent will be seen as less risky. Maybe then it will get a higher multiple, but I don't like to play on high multiples. 20% payout ratio with a little deduction due to taxes. That would give us an intrinsic value of $2.70 per share. It's currently trading at $1.2 a share. 125% discount. This is why I like the stock so much. Those are very conservative estimates, and my margin of safety is extremely high. Now what if it goes a bit better? Not even very good. 8% growth rate, 6% growth rate, 40 multiple. $3.53 a share. And even if it goes horrible for the company, basically only share buybacks for the next 10 years, and an 8 multiple, you would still make over 10%. This is why I like Airtel Africa so much. Sure, it has some downsides, but after the recent devaluation in the currency, I think that is completely doable. The risk is minimized now, and I'm happily making it a bigger part of my portfolio now. Do you have any other African stocks? If yes, put them down below please. I want to learn more about companies from other continents. I'm very heavily invested in the US and Europe. It's always good to learn about new stocks. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a good day.